This is a LibriVox recording.
This is a LibriVox
All
recording.
LibriVox recordings
All
are in the
LibriVox
public
recordings
domain.
are in the public domain.
For more information, or to volunteer, visit
please visit
LibriVox.org.
LibriVox.org.
Read by Kirsten Ferreri. The Adventures of Sherlock
The
Holmes
Adventures of Sherlock
by
Holmes
Arthur Conan
by
Doyle.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Adventure 5. The
Adventure
5
number
Orange
7.
Pips.
The Adventure of the Blue
When I glance
Carbuncle.
over my notes and records of the Sherlock Holmes cases
I had
between
called
the years
upon my
82
friend
and 90,
Sherlock Holmes
I am
upon the
faced
second
by
morning
so
after
many which
Christmas,
present
with
strange
the
and
intention of
interesting
wishing him the
features
compliments of the
that it is
season.
no easy matter to
He was
know which
lounging
to
upon the
choose
sofa
and which to
in a purple
leave.
dressing gown,
Some,
pipe
however,
rack
have
within
already
his
gained
reach upon the
publicity
right,
through the
and a
papers,
pile of crumpled
and others
morning
have not
papers,
offered a
evidently
field for
newly
those
studied,
peculiar
near at hand.
qualities which my friend
Beside the
possessed
couch
in
was a
so
wooden
high a
chair,
degree,
and on the angle
and
of
which
the
it is
back
the
hung a
object
very
of these
seedy
papers
and
to illustrate.
disreputable hard felt
Some, too,
hat,
have baffled his
much the worse
analytical
for wear
skill,
and cracked
and would
in
be
several
as
places.
narratives beginning without an
A
ending,
lens and a forceps
while others
lying
have
upon
been
the
but
seat of the
partially
chair
cleared up,
suggested that the hat
and
had
have
been
their
suspended in this
explanations
manner
founded
for
rather
the
upon
purpose of
conjecture and
examination.
surmise than on that
"You are
absolute
engaged,"
logical
said
proof
I.
which was
"Perhaps
so
I
dear to
interrupt
him.
you."
There is,
"Not at
however,
all.
one of these
I'm glad
last
to have
which
a
was so
friend with whom I can
remarkable in
discuss
its
my
details
results.
and so
The
startling
matter is
in
a
its
perfectly
results
trivial one."
that I am
He
tempted to
jerked
give
his
some
thumb in
account
the
of it,
direction of the old
in
hat.
spite of the fact
But
that there are
points
points in connection with it which
are
have never
not
been,
entirely
and
devoid of
probably never
interest
will
and
be,
even of instruction.
entirely cleared up.
I seated myself in his
The year
armchair
87
and warmed
furnished
my
us
hands
with a
before his
long
crackling
series of
fire,
cases of
for a
greater
sharp
or
frost
less
had set
interest,
in, and the
of
windows
which
were
I
thick
retain
with
the
the ice
records.
crystals.
Among my headings under
I
this
suppose,
one
I
12
remarked,
months,
that
I find an
only
account of
as
the
it
adventure
looks,
of the
this thing has
Paradol
some
Chamber,
deadly
of the
story
Amateur
linked onto
Mendicant
it,
Society,
that it is the
who
clue
held
which
a
will guide you in
luxurious
the
club in
solution
the
of
lower
some
vault
mystery
of a
and the
furniture
punishment of some
warehouse,
crime.
of the facts connected
No,
with the
no
loss of the
crime,
British
said
bark
Sherlock
Sophie
Holmes,
Anderson,
laughing.
of the
Only one of
singular
those whimsical
adventures of
little
the Grice
incidents which will
Pattersons in
happen
the
when you have
island of
4
Uffa,
million human
and
beings all
finally of the
jostling each
Camberwell
other within the
poisoning
space of a
case.
few square miles.
In the latter, as may
Amid
be
the action
remembered,
and reaction of
Sherlock
so
Holmes
dense a
was
swarm
able,
of
by
humanity,
winding up
every
the dead
possible
man's watch,
combination of
to
events
prove
may
that
be
it had
expected
been
to
wound
take
up
place,
2 hours
and
before,
many a little problem
and that
will be
therefore the
presented which may
deceased
be
had gone
striking
to
and
bed within
bizarre
that time,
without being
a
criminal.
deduction which was
We
of
have
the
already
greatest
had
importance
experience
in
of such.
clearing up the case.
So
All
much
these
so,
I may
I
sketch
remarked,
out at
that
some
of the
future
last
date,
6 cases
but none of
which I
them
have added
present
to my
such
notes,
singular
3
features
have
as
been
the
entirely
strange
free of
train
any
of
legal crime.
circumstances which I have now taken
Precisely.
up my pen
You
to
allude to
describe.
my attempt to recover the Irene
It was
Adler
in the latter
papers,
days of
to the
September,
singular case of
and
Miss
the
Mary
equinoctial
Sutherland, and to
gales
the
had
adventure
set
of the
in with
man with the
exceptional
twisted lip.
violence.
Well, I
All
have
day
no
the
doubt
wind
that
had
this small
screamed,
matter will
and
fall
the
into
rain
the
had
same
beaten
innocent
against the
category.
windows, so that even
You know
here, in the
Peterson,
heart
the
of great
commissionaire?
handmade London, we
Yes.
were forced to raise
It
our
is to him
minds
that
for the
this trophy
instant
belongs.
from the routine of life,
It is his hat.
and to recognize
No,
the
he
presence
found
of
it.
those
Its
great
owner is
elemental
unknown.
forces which
I
shriek
beg
at
that you will
mankind
look
through the
upon
bars
it not
of his
as a battered
civilization,
billycock, but
like
as an
untamed
intellectual
beasts in a
problem.
cage.
And
As
first,
evening
as to
drew
how
in,
it came here.
the storm grew
It
higher
arrived
and
upon
louder,
Christmas morning,
and
in
the wind
company with a
cried
good
and
fat
sobbed
goose,
like a child
which
in
is,
the
I have
chimney.
no doubt, roasting at this
Sherlock
moment in
Holmes
front of
sat
Peterson's
moodily at
fire.
one side of the
The
fireplace,
facts are these.
cross-indexing
About
his
4
records of
o'clock
crime,
on Christmas morning,
while I,
Peterson,
at the
who, as
other,
you
was
know, is a
deep in
very
one of
honest
Clark
fellow,
Russell's
was
fine sea
returning from
stories
some small
until the howl of the
jollification and
gale
was
from
making his
without
way homeward
seemed
down
to blend
Tottenham
with the
Court
text,
Road.
and the
In
splash of
front
the
of him,
rain
he
to
saw,
lengthen
in the
out into the
gaslight,
long
a
swash of
tallish
the
man
sea waves.
walking with a slight
My
stagger
wife
and
was on a
carrying a
visit
white
to her
goose
mother's,
slung over his
and
shoulder.
for a few days I was a
As he
dweller
reached the
once
corner
more
of
in my
Goose
old
Street,
quarters at
a
Baker
row
Street.
broke out between this stranger and a little knot
"Why,"
of roughs.
said I, glancing
One
up
of
at
the
my
latter
companion,
knocked off the man's
"that was
hat,
surely the
on
bell.
which he raised his
Who
stick
could
to
come
defend
up
himself,
tonight? Some
and
friend
swinging
of
it
yours,
over his
perhaps?"
head, smashed the shop
"Except
window
yourself,
behind
I
him.
have none," he answered.
Peterson
"I do
had
not
rushed forward to
encourage
protect the
visitors."
stranger from his assailants.
"A client, then?"
But the man, shocked at having
so,
broken
it is
the
a
window and
serious
seeing an
case.
official-looking
Nothing
person
less
in
would bring a
uniform
man
rushing
out on
towards him,
such a day and
dropped
at
his
such
goose,
an hour.
took to his heels, and
But I
vanished
take
amid
it
the
that it is
labyrinth
more
of small
likely to be
streets
some
which lie at
crony
the
of the
back
landlady's.
Tottenham Court Road.
Sherlock Holmes
The roughs
was
had
wrong
also
in his
fled at the
conjecture,
appearance
however,
of Peterson,
for there
so that
came a
he was
step
left
in the
possession
passage and
of
a
the
tapping
field
at
of
the
battle,
door.
and also
He
of the
stretched out
spoils
his
of
long
victory,
arm to
in
turn
the
the
shape
lamp
of
away
this
from
battered
himself
hat and a
and
most
towards the vacant
comfortable
chair
Christmas
upon
goose,
which a newcomer must sit.
which surely he
"Come
restored
in,"
to
said
their
he.
owner. My dear fellow,
The
there
man who
lies the
entered was
problem.
young, some
It is
2
true
and
that
20 at the
for
outside,
Mrs. Henry
well
Baker was
groomed and
printed
trimly
upon a small
clad,
card
with
which
something
had
of
been tied to
refinement
the
and
bird's left
delicacy in
leg,
his bearing.
and it is also
The
true that
streaming
the
umbrella
initials
which he held in
H.B.
his
are
hand,
legible upon
and
the
his
lining
long
of his
shining
hat.
waterproof,
But
told of
as
the
there are
fierce
some
weather through which
thousands
he
of
had come.
Bakers and some hundreds
He
of
looked
Henry
about him
Bakers in this
anxiously
city
in
of
the
ours,
glare of the lamp,
it's not easy
and
to
I could
restore
see that
lost
his
property
face
to
was
any one
pale
of
and
them.
his eyes heavy, like
What
those
then
of a
did
man
Peterson
who is
do?
weighed down with some
He
great
brought round both
anxiety.
hat and goose to me
"I owe you
on
an
Christmas
apology,"
morning,
he said,
knowing that even the
raising his
smallest
golden
problems are
pince-nez
of
to his
interest to me.
eyes.
The
I
goose
trust that
we
I am not
retained until
intruding.
this morning,
I
when
fear
there were
that I have
signs
brought
that,
some
in spite of the
traces of the
slight
storm
frost,
and rain into
it
your
would be
snug
well that
chamber.
it should be eaten without unnecessary
Give me your
delay.
coat and umbrella, said
Its
Holmes.
finder has
They may
carried it
rest
off,
here on the
therefore,
hook, and
to
will be dry
fulfill the
presently.
ultimate destiny
You
of
have
a
come up
goose,
from the
while
southwest,
I
I see.
continue to retain the hat
Yes,
of the
from
unknown
Horsham.
gentleman who lost his
That
Christmas
clay
dinner.
and chalk mixture which I see
Did he
upon
not
your toe caps
advertise?
is quite distinctive.
No.
I
Then
have
what
come
clue
for
could you
advice.
have as to his identity?
That is easily got.
Only as much as
And
we can
help.
deduce from his
That
hat.
is not always so
Precisely.
easy.
But you're joking.
I have
What
heard of
can
you,
you
Mr.
gather
Holmes.
from this old battered
I heard
felt?
from Major Prendergast
Here
how
is my
you
lens.
saved him in the
You know my
Tankerville Club
method.
scandal.
What can you gather
Ah, of
yourself
course,
as
he
to
was
the
wrongfully
individuality
accused
of
of
the man
cheating
who
at
has worn
cards.
this article?
He said that you could solve
I took the
anything,
tattered object in my hands
said too
and turned
much.
it over rather ruefully.
that you are never
It was a
beaten.
very ordinary black hat
I have
of
been
the
beaten
usual
4 times,
round
3
shape,
times by men,
hard
and once
much
by
the
a
worse
woman.
for wear.
But
The
what is
lining
that
had been of
compared
red
with
silk,
the number of
but
your
was a good
successes?
deal discolored.
It is
There was no
true that
maker's
I have
name,
been
but
generally
as Holmes
successful.
had remarked, the initials
Then you
HB
may be
were
so with
scrawled
me.
upon one side.
I beg
It
that you
was
will
pierced
draw
in
up
the
your
brim
chair to
for
the
a hat
fire,
securer,
and favor me
but
with
the
some
elastic
details
was
as to your
missing.
case.
For the rest,
It
it
is
was
no
cracked,
ordinary one.
exceedingly dusty,
None
and
of those
spotted
which
in
come to
several
me are.
places,
I am
although
the
there
last
seemed
court
to
of
have been
appeal.
some attempt to hide the discolored
And
patches
yet I
by
question,
smearing them
sir,
with
whether,
ink.
in all your experience, you have
I can
ever
see nothing,
listened to a
said
more
I, handing it
mysterious
back to
and
my friend.
inexplicable chain of events
On the
than those
contrary,
which have
Watson, you
happened
can
in
see
my own
everything.
family.
You fail, however, to
You fill me with
reason from
interest,
what
said
you see.
Holmes.
You are too
Pray, give
timid
us
in
the
drawing your
essential
inferences.
facts from the commencement, and I can
Then pray
afterwards
tell
question
me
you
what
as
it
to
is
those
that you
details
can
which
infer
seem
from
to
this
me to
hat.
be most important.
He picked
The
it
young
up
man
and
pulled his
gazed at
chair
it
up
in the
and
peculiar
pushed his wet
introspective
feet out
fashion
toward
which
the
was
blaze.
characteristic of him.
My name, said he,
It is
John
perhaps
Openshaw,
less suggestive
but
than
my
it
own
might have
affairs
been,
have, as
he
far as I
remarked.
can understand, little
And
to
yet
do
there
with
are
this
a
awful
few
business.
inferences which are very distinct,
It is a
and
hereditary
a few
matter.
others which represent
So
at
in
least
order
a
to
small
give you an
balance of
idea of the
probability.
facts, I
That
must
the
go
man was
back to
highly
the commencement of
intellectual
the
is of
affair.
course obvious upon the face of it,
You
and
must
also
know
that he
that
was
my
fairly
grandfather
well-to-do
had 2
within the last
sons,
3 years,
my uncle Elias
although
and
he
my
has now
father
fallen upon
Joseph.
evil days.
My father had
He
a small
had
factory
foresight,
at
but
Coventry,
has less now
which he
than
enlarged
formerly,
at the
pointing
time of
to
the
a
invention
moral
of bicycling.
retrogression, which
He
when
was a
taken with the
patentee
decline
of
of
the
his fortune,
Openshaw
seems to
unbreakable
indicate
tire,
some evil
and his
influence,
business met
probably
with
drink,
such
at work
success
upon
that
him.
he was able to sell
This
it
may
and
account
to
also
retire
for the
upon a
obvious
handsome
fact
competence.
that his wife has ceased
My
to love
uncle
him.
Elias
My
emigrated to
dear Holmes,
America when he was
he
a
has,
young
however,
man,
retained some
and became a
degree of
painter in
self-respect,
Florida, where
he
he was
continued,
reported to have
disregarding my
done very
remonstrance.
well. At the
He
time
is
of
a
the
man
war
who
he
leads a
fought in
sedentary
Jackson's
life,
army,
goes out
and
little,
afterwards
is
under
out of
Hood,
training
where he rose to
entirely,
be a colonel.
is middle-aged, has
When Lee
grizzled
laid
hair
down
which
his
he has
arms,
had
my
cut
uncle
within the
returned to
last
his
few days,
plantation,
and which he
where he
anoints with
remained
lime
for
cream.
3 or 4 years.
These are
About
the more patent facts
1869
which
or
may be deduced from
1870
his
he
hat.
came back to Europe,
Also, by the
and
way,
took a
that
small
it is
estate in
extremely
Sussex near
improbable that he
Horsham.
has had gas laid
He
on
had
in
made a
his
very
house.
considerable fortune
You're
in the
certainly
States,
joking,
and
Holmes.
his reason for
Not in
leaving
the
them
least.
was his
Is it
aversion to the
possible that
Negroes,
even now,
and
when I
his
gave you
dislike
these
of the
results, you were
Republican
unable to see
policy
how
in
they are
extending the
attained?
franchise to them?
Well, I have no doubt
He
that
was
I
a
am very
singular
stupid,
man,
but I
fierce
must
and
confess that I am
quick-tempered,
unable
very
to follow you.
foul-mouthed when he
For
was
example,
angry, and
how
of
did
a
you
most
deduce that this
retiring
man was
disposition.
intellectual?
During all the
For
years that
answer,
he lived
Holmes
at
clapped
Horsham,
the hat upon
I
his
doubt
head.
if he ever set
It
foot
came
in
right
the
over
town.
the forehead
He
and
had a
settled upon
garden
the
and
bridge
2
of
or
his
3
nose.
fields round his house,
It is a
and
question
there
of
he would
cubic
take his
capacity,
exercise,
said he.
though very
A man
often
with so
for
large
weeks
a
on end
brain
he
must
would
have
never leave
something
his
in it.
room. He drank a
The
great
decline
deal
in
of
his
brandy,
fortunes, then?
and smoked very
This
heavily,
hat is 3
but he
years
would
old.
see no
These
society,
flat
and did
brims
not
curled
want
at
any
the edge
friends,
came in then.
not even his own
It is
brother.
a hat of the very best
He
quality.
didn't mind me.
Look at the band of
In
ribbed
fact, he
silk
took a
and the
fancy
excellent
to me,
lining.
for at the
If this
time when
man
he
could
saw me
afford to buy
first I
so
was a
expensive
youngster
a
of
hat
12
3
or
years
so.
ago and has had
This
no
would
hat
be in the
since,
year
then he has
1878,
assuredly gone
after
down
he
in the
had been
world.
8 or 9 years in England.
Well, that is
He
fair
begged my
enough,
father
certainly.
to let me live with
But
him,
how about
and he
the
was very
foresight
kind
and the
to me in
moral
his way.
retrogression?
When he was
Sherlock
sober,
Holmes
he used to
laughed.
be fond of
Here
playing
is the
backgammon and
foresight,
draughts with
said
me,
he, putting
and
his
he would
finger
make
upon
me be
the
his
little disc and loop
representative
of the hat
both with the
secure.
servants and with the
They are
trade
never
people,
sold upon hats.
so that by the
If this
time I
man
was
ordered
16
one,
I
it
was
is a
quite
sign of
master
a
of the
certain
house.
amount of foresight,
I kept all the
since he went
keys
out of
and
his
could
way
go
to take
where I
this
liked
precaution
and do
against the
what I
wind.
liked, so long
But
as
since
I
we
did
see
not
that he
disturb
has
him in his
broken
privacy.
the elastic and is not
There was
troubled
one
to replace
singular
it,
exception,
it is
however,
obvious that he has
for he
less
had a single
foresight
room,
now than
a
formerly,
lumber
which
room
is
up
a
among the
distinct proof
attics,
of a weakening
which was
nature.
invariably locked,
On the other hand,
and which he
has
would never
endeavored to
permit
conceal
either
some of
me
these
or anyone
stains
else
upon
to
the
enter.
felt by daubing
With a
them with
boy's
ink,
curiosity,
which is a
I
sign
have
that he
peeped
has not
through the
entirely
keyhole,
lost his
but I was
self-respect.
never able to see more
The
than such a
reasoning is certainly
collection of
plausible.
old trunks and bundles as would
The
be
further
expected in
points
such
that
a
he is
room.
middle-aged, that
One
his hair
day,
is grizzled,
it was
that
March
it
of
has been recently
1883,
cut, and that
a
he
letter
uses
with a
lime
foreign
cream,
stamp
are all
lay
to be
upon the
gathered from a
table in
close
front of the
examination
colonel's
of the
plate.
lower part of the lining.
It was not a
The
common thing
lens
for him to
discloses
receive
a
letters,
large number
for
of
his
hair
bills were
ends,
all paid in
clean
ready
cut
money,
by the scissors
and
of the
he had
barber.
no friends of any
They all
sort.
appear to be adhesive,
From
and there
India,
is a
said
distinct
he,
odor
as
of
he took
lime
it up,
cream.
Pondicherry
His dust,
postmark.
as you
What
will
can this
observe,
be?
is not the gritty gray
Opening it
dust of the
hurriedly,
street,
out
but
there
the
jumped
fluffy
5
brown
little
dust of the
dried
house,
orange pips,
showing that it has
which
been
pattered
hung up
down
indoors
upon his
most
plate.
of the time.
I
While
began
the
to
marks
laugh
of
at this,
moisture upon
but the
the
laugh was
inside are
struck
proof
from my
positive
lips at the
that
sight
the
of his
wearer
face.
perspired very
His lip
freely,
had fallen,
and could
his
therefore
eyes were
hardly be in the
protruding,
best of
his
training.
skin the color of putty,
But his
and he
wife,
glared at the
you said that
envelope
she
which
had
he
ceased to
still
love
held
him.
in his trembling hand.
This hat has not been brushed
KKK,
for
he
weeks.
shrieked. And
But
then,
I see you,
my
my dear
God,
Watson,
my
with a
God,
week's
my sins have
accumulation of
overtaken
dust
me.
upon your hat, and when
What
your
is
wife
it, Uncle? I
allows you to
cried.
go out in such a state,
Death,
I shall
said he.
fear that you also
And
have
rising
been
from the
unfortunate
table,
enough to
he
lose
retired
your
to his
wife's
room,
affection.
leaving me
But he
palpitating
might
with
be a
horror.
bachelor.
I took
Nay,
up the
he
envelope
was bringing
and
home
saw
the
scrawled
goose
in
as a
red
peace
ink
offering
upon
to
the
his
inner
wife.
flap, just
Remember the
above the
card
gum,
upon the bird's
the
leg?
letter K 3
You
times
have an answer
repeated.
for everything.
There was nothing else,
But how on earth do you
save the
deduce
5
that the
dried
gas
pips.
is not laid on in his
What
house?
could be the reason of his overpowering
One
terror?
tallow stain,
I
or
left
even
the breakfast
two, might
table,
come by chance.
and as I ascended the
But when I
stair
see
I
no
met
less
him
than
coming
5,
down with an
I
old
think that
rusty
there can
key,
be little doubt
which
that
must
the
have
individual
belonged
must
to the
be
attic,
brought
in
into
one
frequent
hand, and a
contact
small
with
brass
burning
box
tallow,
like a cash box in
walks
the other.
upstairs at night probably with
They
his
may
hat
do
in
what they
one
like,
hand and a
but I'll
guttering
checkmate
candle
them
in the
still,
other.
said he with an oath.
Anyhow, he never got
Tell
tallow
Mary
stains
that I
from a
shall
gas
want a
jet.
fire in my room today,
Are you
and
satisfied?
send down to Fordham,
Well,
the
it is
Horsham
very
lawyer.
ingenious, said I, laughing.
I did as he ordered,
But
and
since,
when the
as you
lawyer
said just
arrived,
now,
I
there
was
has
asked
been
to
no
step
crime
up to the
committed
room.
and no harm done,
The fire
save
was
the
burning
loss of a
brightly,
goose,
and in
all
the
this
grate
seems
there
to
was
be
a
rather
mass
a
of
waste of
black
energy.
fluffy ashes, as of burned
Sherlock
paper,
Holmes had opened
while
his
the
mouth
brass
to
box
reply
stood
when the
open
door
and
flew
empty
open,
beside
and
it.
Peterson, the
As I
commissionaire,
glanced at the
rushed into
box,
the
I
apartment
noticed with a
flushed
start
cheeks
that
and
upon
the
the
face
lid was
of a man who
printed
is
the
dazed
treble
with
K which I
astonishment.
had read in the morning upon the
The
envelope.
goose, Mr. Holmes. The
I
goose,
wish you,
sir,
John, said
he
my
gasped.
uncle, to witness my
Eh?
will.
What of it then?
I leave my
Has
estate,
it returned
with
to
all
life
its
and flapped
advantages
off
and
through
all
the
its
kitchen window?
disadvantages, to my brother,
Holmes twisted
your
himself
father,
round upon the
whence
sofa
it
to
will
get a
no
fairer
doubt
view of the
descend
man's
to you.
excited face.
If you can enjoy it
See
in
here,
peace,
sir.
well and good.
See what my wife
If you
found in
find
its
you
crop.
cannot, take my
He
advice,
held
my
out his
boy,
hand
and leave it to your
displayed upon
deadliest
the
enemy.
center of the palm
I am
a
sorry to give
brilliantly
you such a
scintillating
two-edged
blue
thing,
stone,
but I
rather
can't say
smaller
what
than a
turn
bean
things
in
are going to
size,
take.
but of such
Kindly
purity and
sign the
radiance
paper
that
where
it
Mr.
twinkled
Fordham
like an
shows you.
electric point in the dark hollow of his
I
hand.
signed the paper as directed,
Sherlock Holmes sat
and
up
the
with a
lawyer
whistle.
took it away with him.
By Jove,
The
Peterson,
singular
said he.
incident made,
This
as you
is
may
a treasure
think,
trove
the
indeed.
deepest impression
I
upon
suppose you
me,
know what you've got.
and I pondered over
A
it
diamond,
and turned
sir.
it every way
A
in my
precious
mind
stone.
without being
It
able
cuts
to
into
make
glass
anything
as though
of
it were
it.
putty.
Yet I could not
It's more
shake
than a
off the
precious
vague
stone.
feeling of
It's
dread which
the
it left
precious stone.
behind, though the sensation
Not the
grew less
Countess of
keen as
Morcar's
the
blue
weeks passed
carbuncle,
and
I
nothing happened to
ejaculated.
disturb the usual
Precisely
routine of
so.
our lives.
I ought
I
to
could
know
see
its
a
size
change
and
in my
shape,
uncle,
seeing that I
however.
have read the
He drank
advertisement
more
about
than
it in
ever,
the Times every
and he
day
was less
lately.
inclined for any
It is
sort of
absolutely
society.
unique, and its value
Most
can
of
only
his
be
time he would
conjectured,
spend in
but
his
the
room,
reward offered
with
of
the door
£1,000
locked upon
is
the
certainly not
inside,
within a
but
20th part of
sometimes
the
he would
market
emerge
price.
in a sort of drunken frenzy,
£1,000!
and would burst
Great
out of the
Lord of
house
mercy!
and tear about the garden with a
commissionaire
revolver
plumped
in his
down into
hand,
a chair
screaming
and
out
stared
that
from
he
one
was
to the
afraid
other
of
of
no
us.
man, and that he was not
That
to
is
be
the
cooped
reward,
up like a
and I
sheep
have
in a
reason
pen
to know
by
that
man
there are
or devil.
sentimental considerations in the background
When these
which
hot
could
fits
induce
were
the
over,
Countess
however,
to part with half
he
her
would
fortune
rush
if she
tumultuously
could
in at
just
the door,
recover the gem.
and lock and bar it behind him,
It was
like a man
lost,
who
if I
can brazen
remember
it out
right,
no
at the
longer
Hotel
against the terror
Cosmopolitan,
which
I
lies
remarked.
at the root of his soul.
Precisely so.
At such
On the
times I have
22nd of
seen his
December,
face,
just 5 days
even on a
ago,
cold day,
John Horner,
glisten
a
with
plumber,
moisture,
was
as
accused
though it
of
were
having
new raised from a
abstracted it
basin.
from the lady's jewel case.
Well, to come
The
to an
evidence
end of the
against him
matter,
was so
Mr.
strong
Holmes,
that the case
and
has
not
been
to
referred
abuse
to
your
the
patience,
assizes.
there came a
I have
night
some
when he
account of
made
the
one
matter
of
here,
those
I
drunken
believe.
sallies from which he
He
never came
rummaged
back.
amid his newspapers,
We found
glancing
him
over
when
the
we went
dates,
to search for
until
him,
at last he
face
smoothed
downward
one
in a
out,
little
doubled
green
it over,
scummed
and read the
pool,
following
which lay
paragraph.
at the foot of the garden.
Hotel
There was no
Cosmopolitan
sign
jewel
of any
robbery.
violence, and the water was
John
but
Horner,
2 feet deep,
26,
so
plumber,
that the
was
jury,
brought up upon the
having
charge of
regard to
having,
his
upon
known
the 22nd
eccentricity,
instant,
brought in a
abstracted
verdict
from
of
the jewel
suicide.
case of the Countess Countess of
But
Morcar,
I,
the
who knew
valuable
how he
gem known
winced
as
from the
Blue
very thought of
Carbuncle.
death, had much
James
ado to
Ryder,
persuade
upper attendant at
myself
the
that he
hotel,
had gone out
gave
of his
his
way to
evidence
meet
to the
it.
effect that he had shown
The matter
Horner up
passed,
to the
however,
dressing room of the
and
Countess
my father
of
entered
Morcar
into
upon the day
possession
of the
of the
robbery,
estate,
in
and
order
of
that he
some
might solder the
£14,000,
second bar of the grate,
which lay
which
to
was
his
loose.
credit at the bank.
He had remained with Horner
One
some little
moment,
time,
Holmes
but had
interposed.
finally been called
Your
away.
statement is, I foresee,
On
one of the
returning,
most
he
remarkable
found
to
that
which
Horner
I had
had
ever listened.
disappeared, that
Let
the
me
bureau
have the
had been
date of
forced
the
open,
reception by
and
your
that the
uncle
small
of the letter,
morocco casket
and the
in
date
which,
of his
as it
supposed
afterwards
suicide.
transpired, the Countess was
The letter
accustomed to
arrived
keep her
on March
jewel,
10th,
was lying empty
1883.
upon the dressing
His
table.
death was 7 weeks
Ryder
later,
instantly gave the
upon
alarm,
the night of
and
May
Horner was
2nd.
arrested the same evening.
Thank you.
But the
Pray
stone could
proceed.
not be found, either upon his person
When my
or in
father
his
took
rooms.
over the Horsham property,
Catherine
he,
Cusack,
at my
maid
request,
of the Countess,
made a
deposed
careful
to having heard
examination of
Ryder's
the
cry
attic,
of dismay
which had been
on
always
discovering
locked
the
up.
robbery,
We
and to
found
having
the brass
rushed into the
box
room
there,
where she found
although
matters
its contents
as
had been
described by the last
destroyed.
witness.
On the inside of the
Inspector
cover was a
Bradstreet,
paper
B
label,
Division,
with the initials
gave
of
evidence as to
KKK
the
repeated
arrest of
upon
Horner,
it,
who struggled
and letters,
frantically and
memoranda,
protested his
receipts, and
innocence
a
in the
register
strongest
written
terms.
beneath. These, we
Evidence of a
presume,
previous
indicated the
conviction for
nature of the
robbery
papers
having
which
been
had
given
been
against the
destroyed by
prisoner,
Colonel
the
Openshaw.
magistrate refused to
For
deal
the rest,
summarily with the
there was
offense,
nothing
but
of much
referred it to the
importance in the
assizes.
attic, save a
Horner,
great
who
many
had shown
scattered
signs of
papers and
intense
notebooks
emotion during
bearing
the
upon my
proceedings,
uncle's life in
fainted away
America.
at the conclusion and was
Some of
carried
them
out
were of the
court.
wartime, and showed that he had done his
So
duty
much for
well,
the police
and
court,
had borne the
said
repute
Holmes,
of a brave
thoughtfully,
soldier.
tossing aside the paper.
Others were of a date during the
The question for
reconstruction
us
of the
now to
southern
solve
states,
is the sequence
and were
of
mostly
events leading
concerned
from
with
a
politics,
rifled jewel
for
case
he
at
had
one end
evidently
to the
taken
crop
a
of
strong
goose
part in
in
opposing the
Tottenham Court Road
carpet-bag
at the other.
politicians who had been sent
You
down
see,
from
Watson,
the north.
our little deductions
Well,
have
it was the
suddenly
beginning
assumed
of
a much more
'84 when my
important and
father
less
came to
innocent
live at
aspect.
Horsham, and
Here
all
is
went
the
as well
stone.
as possible
The stone came
until
from
the
goose,
January of
and the goose
'85.
came from Mr. Henry Baker,
On the fourth
the
day
gentleman
after
with
the
the
new
bad
year,
hat and all the
I
other
heard my father give
characteristics
a
with
sharp
which I have
cry of
bored you.
surprise as we sat
So
together
now
at the
we must
breakfast
set
table.
ourselves very seriously
There he
to
was,
finding this gentleman
sitting with a
and
newly
ascertaining
opened
what
envelope
part
in
he
one
has played
hand,
in this little
and
mystery.
5 dried orange
To do
pips in
this,
the
we must
outstretched
try
palm
the
of the other
simplest
one.
means first, and
He had
these
always
lie
laughed at
undoubtedly
what
in
he
an
called my
advertisement
cock
in
and
all
bull
the
story
evening
about the
papers.
colonel,
If this
but he
fail,
looked very
I have
scared and
recourse
puzzled
to
now
other
that the
methods.
same thing had come upon him.
What will you say?
Why,
Give me a
what on
pencil
earth
and
does
that
this
slip of
mean,
paper.
John? He stammered.
Now then,
My heart had
found
turned
at
to
the
lead.
corner of Goodge Street,
It
a
is
goose and a black
KKK, said
felt
I.
hat. Mr.
He
Henry
looked
Baker
inside
can
the
have the
envelope.
same by applying
So
at
it is, he
6:30 this
cried.
evening
Here
at
are the very
221
letters.
B Baker Street.
But what is this written above
That's
them?
clear and concise.
Put the papers
Very,
on the
but
sundial,
will he see it?
I read, peeping over his
Well,
shoulder.
he is sure to keep an
What
eye on the
papers?
papers,
What
since to a
sundial?
poor man
He
the
asked.
loss was a heavy one.
The sundial in the
He
garden.
was clearly
There is
so
no
scared
other,
by his
said I.
mischance in breaking
But the
the
papers
window
must
and by
be
the
those
approach
that are
of Peterson
destroyed.
that he thought of nothing
Pooh,
but flight.
said he,
But
gripping
since
hard
then,
at
he
his
must have
courage.
bitterly
We
regretted
are in
the
a
impulse
civilized
which
land
caused him to
here,
drop his
and we
bird.
can't have
And then
tomfoolery
again,
of this kind.
the introduction of his
Where does the
name will
thing
cause
come
him
from?
to see it, for everyone who knows him
From
will direct his
Dundee,
attention to it.
I answered,
Here you
glancing
are,
at the
Peterson.
postmark.
Run down to the advertising
Some
agency and have
preposterous
this put in the
practical
evening
joke, said
papers.
he. What have I to do
In
with
which, sir?
sundials and papers?
Oh, in
I
the
shall
Globe,
take no notice
Star,
of such
Pall Mall,
nonsense.
St. James, Evening
I should
News,
certainly
Standard,
speak to the
Echo,
police,
and
I
any
said.
others that occur to you.
And be laughed at for
Very
my
well,
pains.
sir. And
Nothing
this
of the
stone?
sort.
Ah, yes, I shall
Then
keep
let
the
me do
stone.
so.
Thank you.
No, I forbid you.
And I say,
I
Peterson,
won't have a
just buy
fuss made
goose on
about
your way
such
back
nonsense.
and leave it here with me, for we
It was in
must
vain
have
to
one
argue
give
with
to this
him,
gentleman
for
in
he
place
was a
of the
very
one which your
obstinate
family
man.
is now devouring.
I went about, however, with a heart which was
When
full
the
of
commissionaire had
forebodings.
gone, Holmes
On the
took up
third day
stone
after the
and held
coming
it
of the
against
letter,
light.
my father went from
It's a
home
bonny
to visit
thing,
an old
said
friend
he.
of his,
Just
Major
see how it
Freebody,
glints and
who is in the
sparkles.
command of one of the
Of course,
forts upon
it is a
Portsdown
nucleus
Hill.
and focus of crime.
I was glad
Every
that
good
he should
stone
go,
is.
for it
They are the
seemed to me
devil's
that
pet
he was
baits.
further from danger when
In the
he was
larger
away
and
from
older
home.
jewels, every facet
In that,
may
however,
stand
I
for a
was in
bloody
error.
deed.
Upon
This
the
stone is
second
not
day
yet
of his
20 years
absence,
old.
I received
It
a
was found on the
telegram
banks
from
of
the
the
major,
Amoy River in
imploring me to
southern
come at
China,
once.
and is
My
remarkable
father
in
had
having
fallen
every
over one of the
characteristic
deep
carbuncle,
chalk pits
save
which
that it
abound
is
in the
blue in
neighborhood,
shade instead of
and was
ruby
lying
red.
senseless with a
In
shattered
spite of
skull.
its youth, it is already a sinister
I hurried
history.
to him,
There
but
have
he
been
passed
2
away
murders,
without
a
ever
vitriol
having
throwing,
recovered
a
his
suicide,
consciousness.
and several robberies
He had,
brought
as it
about for the
appears,
sake
been
of this
returning
40
from
grain
Fareham
weight
in the
of
twilight,
crystallized charcoal.
and as the country was
Who would
unknown
ever
to
think
him,
that so
and the
pretty a
chalk
toy
pit
could be a
unfenced,
purveyor of
the jury
gallows in
had
the
no
prison?
hesitation in bringing in a
I'll lock it
verdict
up in my
of death
strong
from
box now,
accidental
and drop a
causes.
line to the Countess to say
Carefully
that
as
we have
I
it.
examined every fact connected
Do you
with his
think that
death,
this man Horner
I was
is
unable
innocent?
to find anything which
I
could
cannot
suggest
tell.
the idea of murder.
Well, then, do you imagine
There were no
that this
signs of
other one,
violence,
Henry Baker,
no
had anything to
footmarks,
do with the
no
matter?
robbery, no record of
It is, I
strangers
think, much
having
more
been
likely
seen
that
upon the
Henry
roads.
Baker is an
And
absolutely
yet I need
innocent
not
man
tell
who
you
had
that
no
my mind
idea
was
that the
far
bird
from
which
at
he was
ease,
carrying
and
was
that
of
I was well
considerable
nigh
more
certain
value
that
than
some
if it were
foul
made of
plot
solid
had been
gold.
woven around him.
That, however, I shall
In this
determine by a
sinister
very
way,
simple
I
test,
came into my
if we have an
inheritance.
answer to our
You will ask
advertisement.
me why I did not
And you
dispose
can
of
do
it.
nothing till then?
I answer,
Nothing.
because I was well
In that
convinced
case,
that our
I shall
troubles were
continue
in
my
some way
professional
dependent
round.
upon an
But I shall
incident
come
in
back
my
in the
uncle's
evening at the
life,
hour you have
and
mentioned,
that the
for I
danger
would
would
like
be
to see
as
the
pressing
solution
in
of
one
so
house
tangled a
as in
business.
another.
Very glad to have
It was
you.
in
I
January January
dine
of
at 7.
'85 that
There
my
is a
poor father
woodcock,
met
I
his
believe.
end, and
By
2
the
years
way,
and 8 months
in
have
view of
elapsed
recent
since then.
occurrences, perhaps I ought to
During
ask
that
Mrs.
time I
Hudson
have
to
lived
examine
happily
its
at
crop.
Horsham, and I had begun to hope that this
I had
curse
been
had
delayed
passed
at a
away from the
case, and it
family,
was a little
and that
after
it had ended
6:30
with the last
when I found
generation.
myself in Baker Street
I had
once
begun
more.
to take comfort too
As I
soon,
approached the
however.
house, I saw
Yesterday
a tall man
morning
in
the
a
blow
Scotch
fell,
bonnet with a
in
coat
the very
which
shape
was
in which
buttoned
it
up
had
to
come
his
upon
chin,
my father.
waiting outside in the bright semicircle
The young
which
man
was thrown
took
from
from
the
his
fanlight.
waistcoat a crumpled envelope,
Just as I
and
arrived,
turning to the
door was
table,
opened,
he
and we
shook
were
out
shown up
upon it
together to
5
Holmes's
little
room.
dried orange pips.
Mr. Henry Baker, I
This is
believe.
the envelope,
Said
he
he, rising
continued.
from his armchair
The postmark
and greeting
is
his
London,
visitor
Eastern
with the
Division.
easy air of geniality
Within
which
are the
he could
very
so
words
readily
which were
assume.
upon my father's
Pray
last
take this
message.
chair by the fire, Mr. Baker.
KKK,
It's a
and then
cold night,
put
and
the
I
papers
observe
on the
that your
sundial.
circulation is more adapted for summer
What
than
have you
for
done?
winter.
asked Holmes.
Ah, Watson, you have
Nothing.
just come at the right time.
Nothing?
Is that your hat,
To
Mr.
tell the
Baker?
truth, he sank
Yes,
his
sir,
face
that is
into his
undoubtedly
thin
my
white
hat.
hands. I have felt
He was
helpless.
a large man,
I have
with
felt like
rounded
one of those
shoulders, a
poor
massive
rabbits
head,
when the
and a
snake is
broad,
writhing toward
intelligent
it.
face,
I seem
sloping
to
down
be
to
in
a
the
pointed
grasp of
beard
some
grizzled
resistless,
brown.
inexorable
A
evil,
touch of red
which
in
no
nose
foresight
and
and no
cheeks, with a
precautions
slight
can guard
tremor in his
against.
extended hand,
Tut, tut,
recalled
cried
Holmes's
Sherlock Holmes.
surmises to his
You
habit.
must act, man, or
His
you are
rusty
lost.
brown frock
Nothing
coat
but
was
energy can
buttoned right
save
up
you.
in front,
This
with
is
the
no
collar
time for
turned up,
despair.
and his lank wrists protruded
I
from
have
his
seen the
sleeves without a
police.
sign of cuff
Ah,
or shirt.
but then
He
listen
spoke
to
in a
my
slow
story with a
staccato
smile.
fashion,
I am
choosing his words
convinced
with
that the
care,
inspector
and
has
gave the
formed the
impression generally
opinion that the
of a
letters
man
were
of
all
learning and
practical
letters
jokes,
who had had
and that
ill
the deaths
usage
of my
at the hands of
relations were
fortune.
really accidents, as the
We have
jury
retained these
stated,
things for some
and were not to
days,
be
said
connected
Holmes,
with the
because we
warnings.
expected to see an advertisement
Holmes
from
shook
you
his
giving your
clenched
address.
hands in the air.
I am at a loss to know
Incredible
now why you did not
imbecility, he
advertise.
cried.
Our visitor
They have,
gave a rather
however, allowed me a
shamefaced laugh.
policeman, who may remain in the
Shillings have
house
not
with me.
been so plentiful with me
Has
as
he
they
come
once
with you
were,
tonight?
he remarked.
No,
I had
his
no
orders
doubt
were to
that the
stay in
gang
the
of
house.
roughs who assaulted me had
Again
carried off
Holmes
both my
raved
hat
in
and
the
the
air.
bird. I did not
Why
care
did you
to
come
spend
to
more
me?
money
He
in a
cried.
hopeless
And
attempt
above all,
to
why did you
recover
not
them.
come at once?
Very naturally.
I did not know.
By the way, about
It was
the
only
bird,
today that I
we were
spoke to
compelled
Major
eat it.
Prendergast about my troubles,
To eat it,
and was
our
advised
visitor
by
half
him to
rose
come
from
to
his
you.
chair in his excitement.
It
Yes,
is really 2
it would
days
have been
since
no
you have had
use
the
to
letter.
anyone had
We
not
should have
done
acted
so,
before this.
but I presume that
You
this
have
other
no
goose
further
upon the
evidence, I
sideboard,
suppose,
which is
than
about
that
the
which you
same
have
weight
placed
and
before
perfectly
us.
fresh, will
No
answer your
suggestive
purpose
detail
equally
which
well?
might help us.
Oh, certainly,
There is
certainly,
one thing,
answered Mr.
said
Baker
John
with a sigh
Openshaw.
of relief.
He rummaged in
Of
his
course,
coat pocket,
we still have the
and
feathers,
drawing out a
legs,
piece of
crop, and
discolored
so on of your
blue-tinted
own
paper,
bird, so if
he
you
laid
wish.
it out upon the table.
The man burst into a hearty
I have
laugh.
some remembrance, said
They
he,
might be
that on
useful
the
to
day
me
when
as
my
relics
uncle
of my
burned the
adventure,
papers,
said he.
I observed
but
that
beyond
the
that,
small,
I can
unburned
hardly see
margins
what
which lay
use the
amid the
dejected
ashes
member of
were
my
of
late
this
acquaintance
particular
are going
color.
to be to me.
I found
No,
this
sir,
single
I
sheet
think that,
upon the
with
floor
your
of his
permission,
room,
I will
and I am
confine
inclined
my
to think
attention
that
to
it
the
may be
excellent
one of the
bird
papers
which
which has
perceive upon
perhaps
the sideboard.
fluttered out from among the others,
Sherlock
and in
Holmes
that way has
glanced
escaped
sharply across
destruction.
at me, with a
Beyond
slight
the
shrug
mention
of,
of
his shoulders.
pips, I do not
There
see
is
that
your
it
hat,
helps us
then,
much.
and there
I
your
think
bird,
myself
said
that
he.
it is a page
By
from
the
some
way,
private
would it
diary.
bore you to tell
The
me
writing
where
is
you got the other
undoubtedly
one
my
from?
uncle's.
I am somewhat of a fowl fancier,
Holmes moved
and
the
I
lamp,
have seldom
and
seen
we
a better
both bent
grown
over
goose.
the sheet of paper, which
Certainly,
showed
sir,
by its
said
ragged
Baker,
edge that it
who
had
risen
indeed
and
been
tucked
torn
his
from a
newly
book.
gained property under his arm.
It was headed March
There are a few of
1869,
us who frequently
and beneath
alpha
were the
in near
following
museum.
enigmatical
We are to be
notices.
found in the museum
Fourth,
itself during the day, you
Hudson
understand.
came. Same
This
old
year,
platform.
our good host, Windigate by
Seventh,
name,
set the pips
instituted
on
a goose
Macaulay,
club,
Paramore,
by
and
which,
John
on
Swain
consideration
of
of
St.
some
Augustine.
few pence every week, we
Ninth,
were each to receive
Macaulay
a bird
cleared.
at Christmas.
10th,
My pence
John
were duly
Swain
paid,
cleared.
and the rest is
12th,
familiar to you.
visited
I
Paramore.
am much indebted
All
to you,
well.
sir, for a Scotch bonnet is
Thank you,
fitted
said
neither
Holmes,
to my years
folding
nor
up the
my
paper and
gravity.
returning it to our visitor.
With a comical
And
pomposity
now you
of
must
manner,
on no
he
account
bowed
lose another
solemnly to
instant.
both of us,
We
and
cannot
strode
spare
off
time
upon
even
his
to
way.
discuss what you have told me.
So much for
You
Mr.
must
Henry
get home
Baker,
instantly,
said Holmes,
and act.
when he had closed the door
What shall I
behind him.
do?
It is quite
There
certain
is
that
but
he
one
knows
thing to
nothing
do.
whatever about the matter.
It must be done at once.
Are you hungry, Watson?
You must put this piece
Not
of paper
particularly.
which you have shown us
Then
into
I
the
suggest
brass
that we
box
turn
which
our
you have
dinner into a
described.
supper,
You
and
must
follow up
also
this
put in
clue
a
while it
note
is still hot.
to say that all the
Yes,
other
by all
papers were
means.
burned by your uncle,
It was a
and
bitter
that this
night,
is the
so we
only
drew
one
on
which
our
remains.
ulsters and wrapped cravats
You must
around
assert
our
that
throats.
in such words as will carry
Outside,
conviction with
the
them.
stars were shining
Having done
coldly
this,
in a cloudless
you must at
sky,
once
and
put the
breath of
box out
passers-by
upon the
blew out
sundial,
into
as
smoke
directed.
like so many pistol shots.
Do you understand?
Our footfalls rang
Entirely.
out crisply and loudly as we swung
Do
through
not
the
think of
Doctor's
revenge
Quarter,
or anything of that
Wimpole
sort at
Street,
present.
Harley Street,
I think that we
and
may
so
gain
through
that by
Wigmore
means
Street
of the
into
law.
Oxford
But
Street.
we have our web to
In a
weave,
quarter of an
while
hour
theirs
we
is
were in
already woven.
Bloomsbury at the Alpha Inn,
The first
which is a small
consideration
public
is
house
to
at the
remove the
corner of one
pressing
of the
danger
streets
which
that runs
threatens
down
you.
into Holborn.
The second is to
Holmes
clear up
pushed
the
open
mystery
door of the
and to
private
punish
bar
the guilty
and
parties.
ordered 2 glasses of beer from
I
the
thank you,
ruddy-faced,
said the young man,
white-aproned
rising and
landlord.
pulling on his overcoat.
Your beer should be
You have
excellent
given me
if it
fresh
is as
life and
good as
hope.
your geese,
I shall
said
certainly
he.
do as you advise.
My geese? The man
Do not
seemed
lose an
surprised.
instant.
Yes,
And above all, take
I
care
was
of
speaking
yourself
only
in the
half half an
meanwhile,
hour ago to Mr.
for I
Henry
do not
Baker,
think
who
that
was
there
a
can
member
be a
of your
doubt
goose
that you
club.
are threatened by a very
Ah,
real
yes,
and
I
imminent
see.
danger.
But you see, sir,
How do you
them's
go
not
back?
our geese.
By train
Indeed.
from Waterloo.
Whose then? Well,
It
I
is not
got the
yet
2
9.
dozen from a
The streets will
salesman
be
in Covent
crowded, so I
Garden.
trust that you may be in
Indeed.
safety.
I know some
And
of
yet
them.
you
Which
cannot
one was
guard
it?
yourself too closely.
Breckenridge is his name.
I am
I
armed.
don't know him.
That is well.
Well, here's your good
Tomorrow I
health,
shall set to
landlord, and
work upon your
prosperity
case.
to your house. Good
I
night.
shall see you at Horsham, then.
Now for Mr.
No,
Breckenridge,
your secret
he
lies in
continued,
London.
buttoning up his
It
coat
is
as
there
he
that
came
I
into
shall
the
seek
frosty
it.
air. Remember, Watson,
Then I shall
that though
call
we
upon
have
you
so
in a
homely a
day,
thing as a
or in
goose
2
at one
days,
end of this
with
chain,
news as to the
we have
box
at
and
the
the
other a
papers.
man who will certainly
I shall
get
take
7
your
years
advice
penal
in every
servitude
particular.
unless we can establish his
He
innocence.
shook hands with us and
It
took
is
his
possible
leave.
that our inquiry may
Outside, the
but
wind
confirm
still
his
screamed,
guilt.
and the
But in
rain
any case,
splashed
we
and
have a
pattered
line of
against the windows.
investigation which has been missed
This
by the
strange,
police, and
wild
which a
story
singular
seemed to have
chance
come
has
to
placed
us
into
from
our
amid
hands.
the mad
Let
elements,
us follow it
blown
out
in
to the bitter
upon us
end.
like a sheet of
Faces
seaweed
to
in
the
a
south,
gale,
then,
and now to
quick
have
march.
been reabsorbed by them once
We
more.
passed across Holborn, down
Sherlock
Ingle
Holmes
Street,
sat for some
and so
time
through
in
a
silence,
zigzag of
with
slums
his
to
head
Covent
sunk
Garden
forward
Market.
and his eyes
One of
bent
the
upon
largest
the red
stalls
glow
bore
of
the
the
name
fire.
of Breckenridge upon it,
Then he
and the
lit his
proprietor,
pipe,
a
and
horsey
leaning
looking
back in
man
his
with a
chair,
sharp
he
face
watched
and
the
trim
blue
side
smoke
whiskers,
rings
was helping a
as they
boy to put
chased
up the
each other
shutters.
up to the ceiling.
"Good evening. It's a cold night,"
"I
said
think,
Holmes.
Watson," he remarked at
The
last,
salesman nodded
"that
and
of
shot
all
a
our
questioning
cases
glance
we
at
have
my
had
companion.
none more fantastic than this.
"Sold out of geese, I see,"
Save perhaps the
continued
sign of
Holmes,
4.
pointing at the bare
Well,
slabs
yes,
of
save
marble.
perhaps that.
"Let you
And
have
yet this John
500 tomorrow
Openshaw
morning."
seems to me to be
"That's no
walking
good."
amid even greater
"Well,
perils
there are
than did the
some on the
Sholtos.
stall with the gas flare."
But have you, I asked,
but I was
formed
recommended
any
to you."
definite
"Who
conception
by?"
as to what these
"The
perils are?"
landlord of the Alpha." "Oh, yes,
"There can be
I
no
sent him a
question
couple
as
of
to their
dozen.
nature," he answered.
Fine birds they were,
"Then what
too.
are they?
Now, where
Who
did
is
you
this
get them from?"
KKK,
To
and
my
why does he
surprise,
pursue
the
this
question
unhappy
provoked a
family?"
burst of anger from the salesman.
Sherlock Holmes
"Now
closed
then,
his eyes
mister," said
and
he,
placed
with
his
his
elbows
head
upon
cocked
the
and
arms
his
of his
arms
chair,
akimbo,
with his
"what are you
fingertips
driving
together.
at? Let's have it straight now."
"The ideal
"It's
reasoner,"
straight
he
enough.
remarked,
I should like to
would,
know
when
who
he had
sold you
once
the
been
geese
shown a
which you
single
supplied
fact
to
in
the
all its
Alpha.
bearings,
Well,
deduce
then,
from
I
it
shan't
not
tell you.
only all
So
the
now.
chain of events which led up
Oh,
to it,
it's a matter of
but
no
also all
importance.
the results which
But
would
I don't
follow
know
from
why
it.
you should be so
As
warm over
Cuvier
such a
could
trifle.
correctly describe a whole animal
Warm?
by the
You'd be
contemplation
as
of a
warm,
single
maybe,
bone,
if you were
so
pestered
the
as I am.
observer who has
When I
thoroughly
pay good money
understood
for a
one
good
link
article, there
in
should
a
be an
series
end to
of
the business.
incidents
But
should
it's
be
where
able
the
to
geese,
accurately
and who did
state
you
all
sell
the
the
other
geese
ones,
to, and what
both
will you take
before
for
and
the
after.
geese? One would think they are the only geese in the world to
We
hear
have
the
not
fuss
yet
that's made
grasped
over
the
them.
results which the reason alone
Well,
can
I
attain
have no
to.
connection with any other
Problems
people
may be
who have
solved
been
in this
making
study,
inquiries,
which have
said
baffled
Holmes
all those
carelessly.
who have sought a
If you won't tell
solution
us,
by the aid
that's
of their
all,
senses.
that's all.
To
But
carry
I'm
the
always
art,
ready
however,
to back
to
my
its
opinion
highest
on a
pitch,
matter of fowls,
it is
and I have a
necessary that the
fiver on it
reasoner
that the
should
bird
be
I
able
ate
to
is country
utilize
bred.
all the facts
Well,
which
then
have
you've
come
lost
to
your
his
fiver,
knowledge,
for it's town
and
bred,
this in itself
snapped the
implies,
salesman.
as you will
It's
readily
nothing
see,
of the kind.
a possession
I
of
say
all
it is.
knowledge,
I
which
don't
even
believe
in
it.
these days of free
Do you think you
education
know
and
more about fowls than
encyclopedias
I,
is a
who have
somewhat
handled them
rare
ever since I was a
accomplishment.
nipper? I
It is
tell
not
you,
so
all those
impossible,
birds that went to
however,
the Alpha were
that a man should
town-bred.
possess all
You'll
knowledge
never
which is
persuade
likely
me to
to be
believe
useful
that.
to him in his
Will you
work.
bet, then?
And this I have
It's
endeavored
merely
in my
taking your
case
money,
to do.
for I know that I am right.
If I remember
But I'll
rightly,
have a sovereign
you
on with
on
you
one
just to
occasion,
teach you not to
in
be
the early
obstinate.
days of our friendship,
The
defined my
salesman
limits in a
chuckled
very
grimly.
precise fashion.
"Bring me the books, Bill," said
Yes,
he.
I answered, laughing.
The small
It was a
boy
singular
brought round a
document.
small thin
Philosophy,
volume, and a great
astronomy, and
greasy backed
politics
one,
were marked at
laying
0,
them
I
out
remember.
together beneath the
Botany
hanging light.
variable. Geology
"Now then, Mr.
profound as
Cocksure,"
regards the
said
mud
the
stains from
salesman,
any region
"I
within
thought
50
that I
miles
was out
of
of
town.
geese, but
Chemistry
before I
eccentric,
finish, you'll find that
anatomy
there's still one left in my
unsystematic,
shop.
sensational
You see
literature
this
and
little
crime
book?
records unique,
Well,
violin player, boxer,
that's the list of the
swordsman, lawyer,
folk from
and
whom I buy.
self-poisoner by
You see?
cocaine and tobacco.
Well then, here
Those,
on
I
this
think, were
page
the
are the
main
country
points of
folk,
my
and the
analysis.
numbers after their names are where their
Holmes
accounts
grinned at the
are in the
last
big
item.
ledger.
Well,
Now
he
then,
said, I
you
say
see
now,
this other
as I
page
said
in
then,
red ink?
that a man
Well,
should
that's a
keep
list
his
of my
little
town
brain attic
suppliers.
stocked with all
Now
the
look at that
furniture that
third
he is
name.
likely
Just read
to
it out
use,
to me.
and the rest he can
Mrs.
put away in
Oakshott,
the lumber room of his
117
library,
Brixton Road,
where he can get at it
249,
if he wants
read
it.
Holmes.
Now, for
Quite
such
so.
a case as the one
Now,
which has been
turn that up in
submitted
the
to
ledger.
us tonight,
Holmes
we need
turned to the
certainly
page
to muster
indicated.
all our resources.
There you are. Mrs.
Kindly hand me
Oakshott,
down the letter K
117
of the
Brixton
American
Road, egg
Encyclopedia
and
which
poultry
stands
supplier.
upon the shelf beside you.
Now then,
Thank you.
what's the last entry?
Now let us consider the
December
situation
22nd,
and see
24
what may be
geese at
deduced from
7
it.
shillings 6 pence.
In the first place,
Quite so.
we may
There you
start
are.
with a strong
And
presumption
underneath,
that Colonel Openshaw
sold to
had some
Mr.
very
Windigate
strong
of the
reason
Alpha
for leaving
at
America.
12 shillings.
Men at
What
his
do you
time
have
of
to say
life do
now?
not change all their habits and
Sherlock
exchange
Holmes looked
willingly
deeply
the charming
chagrined.
climate of
He
Florida
drew a
for the
sovereign
lonely
from
life
his
of
pocket
an
and
English
threw it down
provincial
upon
town.
the slab, turning away
His
with the
extreme
air
love
of
of
a man whose
solitude in
disgust
England
is too deep
suggests
for
the
words.
idea that he was in
A few
fear of
yards
something
off,
or
he
someone.
stopped under a lamp
So we
post
may
and laughed
assume,
in the
as a
hearty,
working
noiseless
hypothesis,
fashion which was
that it was
peculiar to
fear
him.
of someone or something which drove
When
him
you see a
from
man
America.
with whiskers of that cut and the
As to
pink
what
un
it was he
protruding out of his
feared,
pocket,
we can
you
only
always
deduce
draw him
that
by
by
a bet,
considering the
said he.
formidable letters which were
I dare
received
say
by
that if
himself
I had put
and his
100 pounds
successors.
down in front of him,
Did
that
you
man
remark
would
the
not have given me
postmarks of
such
those
complete
letters?
information as was drawn
The
from him
first
by
was
the
from
idea that he was
Pondicherry,
doing me on a
the
wager.
second from Dundee,
Well,
and
Watson,
the third from
we
London.
are, I fancy, nearing
From
the
East
end of our
London.
quest, and
What
the
do you
only
deduce
point
from
which
that?
remains to be determined is whether
They
we
are
should
all
go on to this
seaports.
Mrs. Oakshott
That the writer
tonight,
was on board
or
of a
whether we
ship.
should reserve it for tomorrow.
Excellent.
It is
We
clear
have
from
already
what
a
that
clue.
surly fellow said
There can be no
that
doubt
there are
that the
others besides
probability,
ourselves
the
who are
strong
anxious about this
probability,
matter, and
is
I
that
should...
the writer was on board
His
of a
remarks
ship.
were suddenly cut
And
short
now
by a
let
loud
us
hubbub
consider
which
another
broke out
point.
from the stall which
In the
we had
case
just
of
left.
Pondicherry, 7
Turning
weeks
round, we saw a
elapsed
little
between the
rat-faced
threat
fellow
and
standing in
its
the center of
fulfillment.
the circle of yellow
In
light
Dundee
which was
it was
thrown by
only
the
some
swinging
3 or
lamp,
4
while
days.
Breckenridge, the
Does
salesman,
that suggest
framed in
anything?
the door of his stall, was shaking his
greater
fist
distance to
fiercely at the
travel?
cringing figure.
But the letter also
I've had
had a
enough
greater
of you
distance
and
to
your
come.
geese, he shouted. I
And I
wish
do
you were
not
all
see
at
the
the devil
point.
together. If you come
There
pestering
is at
me
least
any
a
more with your silly
presumption
talk,
that
I'll
the
set the
vessel
dog
in
at
which
you.
the man or
You
men
bring
are
Mrs.
is a sailing
Oakshott here,
ship.
and I'll answer to her. But
It
what do
looks
you
as
have
if
to
they
do with it?
always send
Did I
their
buy the
singular
geese off
warning
you?
or token before them when
No,
starting
but
upon
one of
their
them
mission.
was mine all the
You
same,
see how quickly
whined
the
the
deed
little man.
followed the sign
Well,
when it
then
came
ask
from
Mrs.
Dundee.
Oakshott for it.
If they had
She
come
told
from
me to ask
Pondicherry in a
you.
steamer,
Well, you
they
can
would have
ask the King
arrived
of
almost
Prussia
as
for
soon
all
as
I
their letter.
care. I've had
But as
enough
a
of
matter
it.
of fact,
Get out of this.
7 weeks elapsed.
He rushed
I
fiercely
think that
forward,
those
and the
7
Inquirer
weeks
flitted away
represented
into
the
the
difference
darkness.
between the mailboat which
Ha!
brought the
This
letter
may save us a
and the
visit to
sailing
Brixton
vessel
Road,
which brought the
whispered
writer.
Holmes. Come with
It
me,
is
and you will
possible.
see what is to be made of this
More
fellow.
than that, it is probable.
Striding through
And
the
now you
scattered
see
knots
the
of people
deadly
who
urgency
lounged
of
round
this
the
new
flaring
case,
stalls,
and why
my
I
companion
urged young
speedily
Openshaw
overtook
to
the little
caution.
man and touched him upon
The blow has
shoulder.
always fallen
He
at the
sprang
end of
round,
the
and I
time which
could
it
see
would
in the
take the
gaslight
senders
that
to
every
travel the
vestige of
distance.
colour had been driven from
But
his
this one
face.
comes from London, and
Who are you,
therefore
then?
we cannot
What do you
count
want?
upon
He
delay.
asked in a quavering voice.
Good God, I cried.
You will
What can it
excuse me,
mean,
said
this
Sherlock
relentless
Holmes blandly,
persecution?
but I could not help
The
overhearing the
papers which
questions which
Openshaw
you put to the
carried
salesman
are
just now.
obviously of vital
I think that I could be
importance
of
to the
assistance
person
to
or
you.
persons in the sailing ship.
You? Who are you?
I think that it is
How could
quite
you know
clear
anything
that
of
there
the
must
matter?
be more than one of them.
My name is
A single
Sherlock
man
Holmes.
could not have
It
carried
is my
out 2
business
deaths
to know
in
what
such
other
a way
people
as
don't
to
know.
deceive a coroner's jury.
But you
There
could know
must have
nothing
been
of this.
several in it, and they
Excuse
must
me,
have
I
been
know
men of
everything
resource
of
and
it.
determination.
You are endeavoring
Their
to trace
papers
some
they mean
geese
to
which
have,
were sold
be the
by
holder
Mrs.
of them who
Oakshott
it
of
may.
Brixton Road to a
In this way,
salesman
you
named
see,
Breckenridge,
KKK
by him in
ceases
turn
to
to
be the
Mr.
initials of
Windigate
an
of the
individual,
Alpha, and by
and
him
becomes
to
the
his
badge of a
club, of
society.
which Mr. Henry Baker is a member.
But of what
Oh,
society?
sir, you are the very man whom I have
Have you
longed to
never?
meet, cried the
Said
little
Sherlock
fellow,
Holmes,
with outstretched
bending
arms and
forward
quivering
and
fingers.
sinking his voice.
I can hardly explain to
Have
you
you
how
never
interested
heard
I am in this
of
matter.
the Ku Klux Klan?
Sherlock Holmes hailed a four-wheeler which
I
was
never
passing.
have.
In that case,
Holmes
we had
turned
better
over the
discuss it in
leaves
a
of the
cozy
book
room
upon
rather
his
than
knee.
in this wind-swept
Here it is,
marketplace,
said he presently.
But pray
Ku
tell me
Klux
before we go
Klan,
further,
a
who is
name
it that I
derived
have
from
the
the
pleasure of
fanciful
assisting?
resemblance to the sound
The
produced
man
by
hesitated
cocking a
for an
rival.
instant.
This
My
terrible
name is
secret
John
society was
Robinson,
formed by
he
some
answered with a
ex-Confederate
sidelong glance.
soldiers in the southern states
No,
after the
no,
Civil
the
War,
real name,
and it
said
rapidly
Holmes
formed
sweetly.
local
It
branches
is always
in different
awkward
parts
doing
of the
business with
country,
an alias.
notably in Tennessee,
A flush sprang to the
Louisiana,
white cheek
the
of the
Carolinas,
stranger.
Georgia, and
Well,
Florida.
then, said he, my real
Its
name
power
is
was
James
used for
Ryder.
political purposes,
Precisely
principally
so.
for the
Head
terrorizing of
attendant
the
of the
Negro
Hotel
voters,
Cosmopolitan.
and the murdering and
Pray step
driving
into
from the country
cab, and I
of
shall
those who were
soon be
opposed
able
to
to
its
tell you
views.
everything which you would wish
Its
to know.
outrages were usually preceded
The
by a
little man
warning
stood
sent to the
glancing
marked
from one
man
to the other
in
of us
some
with half
fantastic
frightened, half
but
hopeful
generally
eyes,
recognized
as
shape,
one who is not sure
a
whether
sprig
he
of
is on
oak
the
leaves
verge of
in
a
some parts,
windfall or a
melon seeds or
catastrophe.
orange pips in
Then he
others.
stepped into the cab, and
On
in half an
receiving
hour
this,
we were
the
back in the
victim
sitting
might
room
either
at Baker
openly
Street.
abjure his former
Nothing had been
ways,
said
or
during our
might
drive,
fly from
but
the
high,
country.
thin breathing
If
of
he
our new
braved the matter
companion and
out,
the claspings
death
and
would
unclaspings
unfailingly
of his
come
hands
upon him,
spoke of
and
the nervous
usually in
tension
some
within him.
strange and unforeseen
Here
manner.
we are, said
So
Holmes
perfect
cheerily,
was the
as we filed into
organization
the
of
room.
the society,
The fire looks
and
very
so
seasonable in
systematic
this
its
weather.
methods,
You look cold,
that there is
Mr.
hardly
Ryder.
a case
Pray
upon
take the
record where
basket
any
chair.
man
I will
succeeded in
just put on
braving
my
it with
slippers before
impunity,
we settle this
or
little
in
matter
which
of yours.
any of its outrages
Now
were
then,
traced home to the
you want to know
perpetrators.
what became of
For
those
some
geese.
years, the
Yes,
organization
sir.
flourished
Or rather,
in
I
spite of
fancy,
the efforts
that
of the
goose.
United States
It was
government
one bird,
and
I
of the
imagine,
better
in which you
classes
were
of the
interested,
community in the
white
South.
with a black bar across the
Eventually,
tail.
in the year
Ryder
1869,
quivered with
the
emotion.
movement rather suddenly
Oh,
collapsed,
sir, he cried.
although there
Can
have
you
been
tell me where
sporadic
it went
outbreaks
to?
of the same sort since
It
that
came
date.
here. Here?
You will observe,
Yes.
said Holmes,
And a most
laying down the
remarkable
volume,
bird it proved.
that the sudden
I don't
breaking
wonder
up
that
of
you
the
should take an
society
interest in it.
was
It laid
coincident
an
with
egg
the disappearance
after
of
it was dead.
Openshaw from
The
America with their
bonniest,
papers.
brightest little blue egg
It may
that
well
ever
have
was
been
seen.
cause and effect.
I have it here.
It
in
is
my
no wonder
museum.
that he and his family have
Our
some of the
visitor
more
staggered to his
implacable
feet
spirits upon
and
their
clutched
track.
the mantelpiece with his
You can
right hand.
understand that this
Holmes
register and
unlocked his
diary
strong box
may
and held
implicate
up
some
the
of the
blue
first men in the
carbuncle,
South,
which
and
shone
that
out
there
like
may
a
be
star
many
with a
who will
cold,
not sleep
brilliant
easy
many
at night
pointed
until
radiance.
it is recovered.
Writer stood glaring
Then
with
the
a
page
drawn
we have
face,
seen
uncertain whether
is
to
such as we
claim or
might
to disown
expect.
it.
It ran,
"The
if I
game's up,
remember
Ryder,"
right,
said
sent
Holmes
the pips
quietly.
to A,
"Hold
B,
up, man,
and
or
C.
you'll be into the
That
fire.
is,
Give
sent
him an
the
arm back into his
Society's
chair,
warning
Watson.
to them.
He's not got blood enough to
Then
go
there
in
are
for felony
successive
with
entries
impunity.
that A and B
Give him a dash of
cleared,
brandy.
or left the country,
So,
and finally
now he
that
looks a
C
little
was
more human.
visited,
What a
with, I
shrimp it is,
fear,
to be
a
sure."
sinister result for C.
For a moment he had
Well, I
staggered
think,
and
Doctor,
nearly
that we may
fallen,
let some
but the
light into
brandy
this
brought a
dark
tinge
place,
of color into his
and I
cheeks, and he
believe that
sat
the only
staring
chance
with
young
frightened eyes
Openshaw
at his
has in the
accuser.
meantime is to do what I have
"I
told
have
him.
almost every link in
There
my
is nothing
hands,
more to be
and all the
said or
proofs
to be
which I
done
could
tonight.
possibly need,
So hand
there
me
is
over
little
my
that you need
violin,
tell me.
and let us try
Still,
to
that
forget
little
for
may
half an
as
hour
well
the
be
miserable
cleared up to
weather
make your
and
case
the still
complete.
more miserable
You
ways
had
of our
heard,
fellow
Ryder,
men.
of this blue stone of the Countess of Morcar's?
It had
It
cleared
was
in the morning,
Catherine Cusack
and the sun
who
was
told me
shining
of it,
with a
said he in a
subdued
crackling
brightness through the
voice.
dim veil which hangs
I
over the great
see,
city.
her ladyship's
Sherlock
waiting
Holmes
maid.
was already at
Well,
breakfast
the
when I came
temptation
down.
of sudden wealth so
You
easily
will
acquired
excuse
was
me
too
for
much
not
for
waiting
you, as
for
it
you,
has been for
said
better
he.
men before you.
I have, I foresee,
But
a
you were
very
not very
busy day
scrupulous
before
in the
me
means
in
you
looking into
used.
this case of young
It seems to
Openshaw's.
me, writer, that there is the making
What
of a
steps will
very
you take?
pretty
I
villain in
asked.
you.
It
You
will
knew that
very
this man
much
Horner,
depend
the
upon the
plumber, had
results
been
of my
concerned
first
in some such
enquiries.
matter before,
I may have to go
and
down
that
to
suspicion
Horsham
would
after
rest
all.
more readily upon him.
You will
What
not
did you
go
do
there
then?
first?
You made some
No,
small
I shall
job in
commence
my
with the
lady's
city.
room, you and
Just
the
ring the
Confederate
bell, and the
Cusack,
maid will bring
and
you
you
up your
managed
coffee.
that he should be the man
As I
sent
waited,
for.
I
And then,
lifted
when he
the
had
unopened
left,
newspaper
you rifled
from the
jewel
table
case,
and
raised
glanced
the alarm,
my eye
and had
over
this
it.
unfortunate man arrested.
It rested upon a
You
heading,
then,
which sent a chill to my
writer,
heart.
threw himself down suddenly
Holmes,
upon
I
the rug and
cried,
clutched at my
you are too
companion's
late.
knees. For God's
Ah,
sake,
said
have
he,
mercy,
laying down
he
his
shrieked.
cup.
Think of
I
my
feared as
father,
much.
of my
How was it
mother.
done?
It would break their hearts.
He spoke
I never
calmly,
went wrong before.
but I could see that he was
I never
deeply
will
moved.
again. I swear it.
My
I
eye
swear
caught
it
the
on a
name of
Bible.
Openshaw,
Oh, don't
and
bring
the
it
heading,
into court.
Tragedy
For
near
Christ's
Waterloo
sake,
Bridge.
don't.
Here is the
Get
account.
back into your chair.
Between
said
9 and
Holmes
10
sternly.
last night,
It is
Police
very well to
Constable
cringe
Cook
and crawl
of the H
now, but you
Division,
thought little
on
enough of
duty
this
near
poor
Waterloo
Horner in the
Bridge,
dock for
heard
a
a
crime
cry
of
for
which he
help
knew
and
nothing.
a splash in the water.
I will
The
fly,
night,
Mr.
however,
Holmes.
was
I will leave
extremely
the
dark
country,
and
sir.
stormy,
Then the
so
charge
that,
against
in
him will
spite
break
of the
down.
help of several passers-by, it was
We will
quite
talk about
impossible
that.
to effect a rescue.
And now let us hear a true
The alarm,
account of the
however,
next
was
act.
given, and
How
by the
came
aid of the
stone
water
into the
police,
goose,
the
and how
body
came
was
the goose
eventually
into the
recovered.
open market?
It proved
Tell
to
us
be
the
that
truth,
of a
for
young
there
gentleman
lies your
whose
only
name,
hope and
as it
safety.
appears from an envelope which was found in his
Ryder
pocket,
passed his tongue
was
over
John
his parched
Openshaw,
lips.
and whose
I will
residence is
tell
near
you it
Horsham.
just as it happened, sir,
It
said
is
he.
conjectured that he may
When
have been
Horner
hurrying
had
down
been
to catch
arrested,
the
it
last
seemed
train
to me
from
that it would
Waterloo
be best for
Station,
me to get away
and
with
that
the
in
stone
his
at once.
haste and
For
the
I did not
extreme
know at what
darkness
moment the police
he missed
might
his
not take it
path
into their heads
and
to
walked
search
over
me
the
and
edge
my
of one
room.
of the small landing
There was no
places
place
for
about
river
the hotel
steamboats.
where it would be safe.
The body
I
exhibited
made
no
out
traces
as
of
if on
violence,
some commission,
and there can be
and I
no
made for my
doubt that the
sister's house.
deceased had been the
She had
victim
married
of
a
an
man
unfortunate
named
accident,
Oakshott and
which
lived in
should have
Brixton
the
Road,
effect
where she
of
fattened
calling the
fowls for the
attention of the
market.
authorities to the
All the way
condition
there,
of the
every man
riverside
I
landing
met seemed to
stages.
me to be a policeman or a
We
detective,
sat in silence
and
for
for all
some
that
minutes,
it was a cold
Holmes
night.
more
The
depressed
sweat
and
was
shaken
pouring
than I
down
had
my
ever
face
seen him.
before I came to the Brixton Road.
That
My
hurts my
sister
pride,
asked me
Watson,
what was the
he
matter
said at
and why I
last.
was so pale.
It is a
But I
petty
told her
feeling,
that
no
I had
doubt,
been
but it
upset
hurts
by
my
the jewel
pride.
robbery at the
It
hotel.
becomes a personal
Then
matter
I
with
went
me
back
now,
into the
and
backyard
if God
and
sends me
smoked a
health,
pipe and
I
wondered
shall
what
set
would
my
be the
hands
best
upon
to
this
do.
gang.
I
That
had
he
a
should
friend
come to
once
me for help,
called
and that
Maudsley,
I should send him
who
away
went
to
the
his
bad
death.
and had just been
He
serving
sprang
his
from
time in
his chair and
Pentonville.
paced about the room in
One day, he
uncontrollable
had met me and
agitation,
fell into
with a
talk
flush
about the
upon
way of
his
thieves
sallow
and how
cheeks,
they could get
and a
rid of what they
nervous
stole.
clasping and
I knew
unclasping of
that
his
he
long,
would
thin
be true to
hands.
me, for I knew one or two things
They
about
must
him.
be cunning
So I
devils,
made
he
up my
exclaimed
mind to
at
go
last.
right on to
How
Kilburn,
could
where
they
he
have
lived,
decoyed
and
him
take him
down
into
there?
my confidence.
The embankment is
He would
not
show
on
me
the
how to
direct
turn the
line to
stone
the
into
station.
money.
The
But
bridge,
how
no
to get
doubt,
to
was
him in
too
safety?
crowded even on
I
such a
thought of
night
the
for their
agonies I had
purposes.
gone through in coming
Well,
from the
Watson,
hotel.
we shall
I
see
might
who will
at
win
any
in the
moment
long
be
run.
seized and searched,
I am
and
going
there
out
would be
now.
the stone in my waistcoat
To the
pocket.
police? No,
I
I
was
shall
leaning
be my
against the
own
wall at the
police.
time,
When
and
I
looking
have
at the
spun the
geese
web,
which were
they may
waddling
take the
about
flies,
round my
but not
feet,
before.
and suddenly an idea came into
All
my
day
head
I
which
was
showed me how I
engaged
could
in my
beat the best
professional work,
detective that ever
and
lived.
it was late in the evening before
My
I
sister
returned
had
to
told
Baker
me some
Street.
weeks before
Sherlock
that I
Holmes
might
had
have
not
the
come
pick of
back
her
yet.
geese for a Christmas
It was
present,
nearly 10
and I knew
o'clock
that she was
before he
always as
entered,
good as her
looking
word.
pale and worn.
I could take my
He
goose
walked
now,
up to the
and in it
sideboard,
I would carry
and
my
tearing
stone
a
to
piece from
Kilburn.
the loaf, he
There
devoured
was a
it
little shed in the
voraciously,
yard,
washing
and
it
behind
down
this
with a
I
long
drove one of
draught
the
of
birds,
water.
a fine big one,
You are
white
hungry, I
with a
remarked.
barred tail. I
Starving.
caught it, and
It had
prizing its
escaped my
bill open,
memory.
I
I
thrust
have had
the
nothing
stone
since
down its throat
breakfast.
as far as my finger could
Nothing?
reach. The bird
Not a
gave a
bite.
gulp,
I had
and
no
I felt
time
the
to think
stone
about
pass
it.
along its gullet and down into
And
its
how
crop.
have you succeeded?
But the creature flapped and struggled, and
you
out
have a
came my
clue?
sister to know what was the matter.
I have them in the
As
hollow
I
of
turned
my
to speak
hand.
to her,
Young
the brute
Openshaw
broke
shall
loose
not
and
long
fluttered off
remain
among the others.
unavenged. Why, Watson, let
"Whatever
us
were
put
you
their
doing
own
with that
devilish
bird, Jim?"
trademark upon
says
them.
she.
It is well thought
"Well,"
of.
said I, "you said you'd give me
What do
one
you
for
mean?
Christmas, and I was feeling which was
He
the
took
fattest."
an orange from the cupboard,
"Oh," says
and tearing
she,
it
"we've
to
set
pieces,
yours
he
aside
squeezed
for
out
you.
the pips upon the
Jim's
table.
bird, we call it.
Of these he
It's
took
the big
5
white one over
and
yonder.
thrust them into an
There's
envelope.
26 of them,
On
which
the
makes one
inside
for
of the
you
flap
and one
he
for
wrote
us, and 2 dozen
S.H.
for the
for
market."
J.O. Then
"Thank
he
you,
sealed
Maggie,"
it,
says I,
and
"but
addressed
if
it
it's
to
all the
Captain
same to
James
you, I'd rather
Calhoun,
have that one I was
Bark
handling
Lone
just
Star,
now.
Savannah, Georgia.
The other is a good 3 pounds
That
heavier,"
will await
said
him when
she,
he enters
"and we
port,"
fattened it
said
expressly
he,
for
chuckling.
you."
"It may
"Never
give him
mind,
a sleepless
I'll have
night.
the other, and
He
I'll
will
take
find
it
it
now,"
as sure
said
a
I.
precursor of his
"Oh,
fate
just
as
as you like,"
Openshaw did
said
before
she,
him.
a little huffed.
And who
"Which
is
is it
this
you want,
Captain
then?"
Calhoun?
"That white one
The
with
leader
the
of the
barred
gang.
tail right in the middle
I
of the
shall have
flock."
the others, but he
"Oh,
first.
very well. Kill it and take it
How
with
did you trace it then?"
Well, I did
He
what
took
she
a
had
large
said,
sheet of
Mr.
paper
Holmes,
from
and
his
I carried
pocket,
the bird all the
all
way to
covered with
Kilburn.
dates and names.
I told my pal what I
"I
had
have
done,
spent
for
the
he
whole
was the
day,"
man
said
that it
he,
was easy to
"over
tell a thing
Lloyd's
like that
registers
to.
and files of the
He
old
laughed
papers,
until he choked,
following the future
and we got a
career
knife
of
and
every
opened the
vessel
goose.
which touched at
My heart
Pondicherry in
turned to water,
January
for
and
there was no
February
sign
in
of the stone,
'83.
and I knew that
There
some
were
terrible
36
mistake had
ships
occurred.
of fair tonnage
I
which
left the
reported
bird,
there
rushed
during
back
those
to my
months.
sister's, and
Of
hurried into the
these,
backyard.
one, the Lone
There was
Star,
not a bird
instantly
to be
attracted
seen
my
there.
attention, since,
"Where are
although
they
it
all,
was
Maggie?" I
reported as
cried.
having cleared from
"Gone to
London,
the dealers,
the name
Jim."
is that which is given
"Which
to one of the
dealers?"
states of the Union.
"Breckenridge, of Covent Garden."
Texas, I think.
"But was there
I
another
was
with
not
a
and
barred
am not
tail?"
sure
I
which,
asked, "the same as
but
the
I
one
know
I
that the
chose?"
ship must have an
"Yes,
American
Jim,
origin.
there were two barred-tailed
What
ones,
then?
and I could never tell them apart."
I searched the Dundee records,
Well, then, of course,
and when
I
I
saw it
found
all,
that the bark
and I
Lone
ran
Star
off
was
as
there
hard
in
as my feet
January
would
of
carry me to this
'85,
man
my
Breckenridge.
suspicion became a
But he had
certainty.
sold the lot at once,
I then
and not
inquired
one
as
word
to
would
the
he tell me
vessels
as
which
to where
lay
they
at
had
present
gone.
in the port of
You heard
London.
him yourselves tonight.
Yes,
Well, he has always
the
answered
Lone
me
Star
like
had
that.
arrived here last
My
week.
sister thinks
I went
that I'm
down to
going
the Albert
mad.
dock and found
Sometimes
that
I
she
think
had
that
been
I am
taken down the
myself.
river by the early
And
tide
now,
this morning,
and
homeward
now
bound to
I am
Savannah.
myself a branded
I
thief,
wired to Gravesend,
without ever
and
having
learned that
touched
she
the
had
wealth for
passed
which
some
I
time
sold
ago.
my character.
And as the wind is
God
easterly,
help
I
me.
have no doubt that
God
she is now
help me.
past the Goodwins, and
He
not
burst
very
into
far from the
convulsive
Isle of
sobbing,
Wight.
with his face buried in his hands.
What will you do then?
There was a long
Oh, I have
silence,
my hand upon
broken
him.
only by
He
his
and
heavy
the two
breathing
mates
and by the
are, as I
measured
learn,
tapping
the
of
only
Sherlock
native-born
Holmes's
Americans in the
fingertips
ship.
upon the edge of the table.
The others are Finns and Germans.
Then my friend rose
I know
and
also
threw
that they
open the
were
door.
all three away from the ship last
"Get
night.
out," said
I
he.
had it from the stevedore who
"What,
has
sir?"
been loading their cargo.
"Oh, heaven bless you!
By the
No
time
more
that their
words.
sailing
Get
ship
out."
reaches Savannah,
And
the
no more
mailboat
words were
will have
needed.
carried this
There
letter,
was a rush,
and
a
the
clatter
cable will
upon the
have
stairs,
informed
the
the
bang of
police
a
of
door,
Savannah
and the
that
crisp
these three
rattle of
gentlemen
running
are
footfalls
badly
from the
wanted
street.
here upon a charge of murder.
"After all, Watson,"
There is a
said
flaw,
Holmes,
however,
reaching
in
up
the
his
best
hand for
laid
his
of
clay
human
pipe.
plans,
"I am
and the
not retained
murderers
by
of
the
John
police to
Openshaw
supply
were
the
never to
deficiencies.
receive the orange
If Horner
pips,
were in danger,
which would
it would
show
be
them
another
that
thing.
another,
But this
as
fellow will
cunning
not
and
appear
as
against
resolute
him,
as
and the case
themselves,
must
was
collapse.
upon their track.
I suppose that I
Very
am
long
committing a
and very
felony,
severe were
but
the
it is just
equinoctial
possible
gales
that I
that
am
year.
saving a soul.
We waited long
This
for
fellow
news
will
of the
not go
Lone
wrong
Star of
again.
Savannah,
He is too
but
terribly
none ever
frightened.
reached us.
Send
We
him
did
to
at
Gale
last
now,
hear
and you
that
make him a
somewhere
Gale
far
bird
out
for
in the
life.
Atlantic a shattered
Besides,
stern
it's the
post of a
season of
boat was seen
forgiveness.
swinging in the
Merry
trough of the
Christmas.
Chance
bay,
has put in our
with
way
the
a
letters
most
LS
singular and
carved upon
whimsical
it.
problem, and its
And that is
solution
all
is
we
its
shall
own
ever
reward.
know of the fate of
If
the
you will
Lone
have the
Star.
goodness to touch the bell, Doctor, we will begin another
End of the
investigation,
5
in
orange
which
pips.
also a bird will be the chief feature. End of The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle.